Hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm the psych coach, and today I am going to be talking to you about how you can use psychological techniques to reduce the amount of time you are spending obsessing. Now, I use the term obsessing to cover a whole range of different types of obsessions you may have. It could be an infatuation that you have with someone. It could be obsessing about an ex-relationship. It could be obsessing about a problem at work. It could be obsessing about an anxiety you've got. So this video is geared towards any kind of obsessing that is taking up a huge amount of your headspace. Some people have a propensity towards obsessing more than others. Some of us have slightly more obsessional personalities. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not a bad thing. But knowing how to rein it in can be really useful because it will probably save you a lot of cognitive energy if you're able to switch off from your obsession sometimes. A lot of the time people say they feel weighed down by their obsession, that they would like to reduce it. So hopefully this video will give you some tips on how you can rein in your obsessive thinking. My first tip is to use worry time. Worry time, I've spoken about in a couple of other videos, is where you allocate particular time in the day to obsessing about a particular problem. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to stop obsessing about it in the interim, but what it does mean is your brain starts learning that just because you have a particular worry right at this moment, you don't need to engage with it straight away. The idea is that you would give yourself, for example, half an hour in the morning, half an hour at lunchtime, half an hour in the evening to obsess about the particular thing that you're obsessing about. And then at any other points in the day, whenever you get the intrusive thoughts of, oh, I've got this problem or I've got this fixation, I need to focus on it, you tell yourself, I can think about that, but I will think about it in 2 hours. I will think about that in half an hour, however long it is until your allocated worry time. Now, for those of you who've got a really big obsession going on, it may be that you need to allocate longer and more frequent episodes of obsession. But the idea is that as time goes on, you start reducing the frequency of your worry time and you start reducing the length of it. And each time you're able to think, okay, I'm not going to engage in this obsession straight away, you are strengthening the muscle in your brain that recognizes just because I have a thought, I don't need to engage with it immediately. So try and apply worry time to not only reduce the amount of time you're spending obsessing about the thought, but to also start exercising the impulse muscle of, I've got this thought, but actually I don't need to engage with it straight away. Another technique for reducing the amount of time you're spending obsessing is to do activities with intention. If you're committing to going out on a dog walk, if you're committing to going on to an exercise class, if you're committing to baking something, to watching something, you need to do those activities with intention, with the intention of focusing on the task in hand. Otherwise, the activities I've just mentioned and hundreds more will just become an opportunity for you to then obsess about whatever it is that you're obsessing about. The dog walk actually isn't a dog walk, it's just a time for you to walk and obsess. Baking isn't a time for you to enjoy cooking, it's just a time for you to obsess, and so on. So you really need to try and make a commitment, if you are in the mode of really obsessing about something, to have an intention that you will focus on the task in hand. It's easier said than done, and of course if you're engaging in a yoga class that's an hour, there's no way you're not going to have obsessive thoughts during that hour, but instead each time you have those obsessive thoughts you need to try and rein yourself back in and think, I need to focus on the task in hand here, I will deal with those thoughts shortly. Trying to have an intention is a really great way of reducing the amount of time you're spending obsessing. And that brings me on to my third tip for trying to control your obsessive tendencies. And my third tip is using visualization. Visualization where you very vividly imagine reducing the obsessive thought that you're having into something very small. So it could be that you imagine a television screen, and on that television screen what's playing is your obsessive thoughts about a particular person, a particular situation, and you can really play that out very vividly. You can imagine what's being said, what's going on, and then you imagine the television turning off. And if you remember really old-fashioned televisions, if you're old enough to remember them, would almost sort of close down into a line and then turn off. That's how they would go. And you basically need to imagine that television screen closing down right into a tiny dot. Other people will say they find it more helpful to imagine curtains closing like you would see at a theatre. The curtains slowly closing on the theatre screen or on the television screen, where your thought gets minimised and minimised. Now, of course, this isn't going to stop you obsessing, but practicing visualization where you really manage to imagine the thought process decreasing and getting smaller and smaller is exercising that muscle in your brain that's able to reduce the intensity of the thoughts. So try visualizing the thought being minimized. And if you can practice that a few times again, it's rather like going to the gym. You're exercising the muscle of minimizing the obsession, and that is no bad thing. Tip number 4 is to try and create some practical solutions to your problem. Not all obsessions are going to be applicable for that solution. However, there are going to be a number that are. If, for example, you're obsessing about whether or not someone likes you or not, you need to try and list all the possible solutions for that issue. If you're obsessing about a particular work problem and how you're going to manage a conversation, you need to list all possible solutions to that. And by listing all the possible solutions, you're confronting yourself with a list of possible ways of dealing with the situation. Now, some of those situations, or rather some of those possibilities, aren't going to be desirable to you. For the first problem I mentioned, obsessing about someone you're attracted to and not being sure if they like you, well, the obvious solution to that is ask them. Now, I'm sure some of you are sitting there thinking, absolutely not. There is no way I'm going to ask the person I'm really attracted to whether they like me or not. But the reality is that is a solution. Maybe there are other solutions that you can come up with, but try and have a really problem-solving focus on your obsession. If you're able to think about the problem in a solution-focused way, you're going to present yourself with a chance to try some of those problem-solving solutions out. Now, again, they're not going to be desirable, but you do need to try and test them. Just because something isn't desirable, it doesn't mean that it's not worth trying. So list the problems, list the solutions, and then list which solutions you're going to try and engage with. And that will mean tolerating a level of discomfort, won't it? Because some of those solutions that you're going to try out aren't going to feel ideal, but will probably, if you can get to an answer with them, reduce the amount of time you're spending obsessing. And the 5th technique that is incredibly useful for stopping your obsessive tendencies is the elastic band technique. Now, there are a few schools of thought about this. Some will say, yes, go ahead, use an elastic band, it's a good idea. Others will say, no, it's old school. Psychology has moved on from that. We don't need to encourage people to sort of ping themselves every time they have an obsessive thought. But I think it's worth a try. The elastic band technique, if you hadn't heard from it, is where you have an elastic band or a hairband around your wrist, and each time you have the obsessive thought, you ping it. You don't ping it particularly hard, but it's just enough of a ping to jolt you into, okay, I need to move on from this. Or enough for you to think, oof, let me look at the elastic band, just to move you out of the obsessive mindset you're in. It's a really good way of suddenly distracting yourself, rather like if you started obsessing and then you suddenly heard a really loud noise, or if you were obsessing and you suddenly smelt a really unpleasant smell. Those things would distract you, wouldn't they, from what was going on in your head. And pinging the elastic band is geared towards getting you out of your head and focusing on the here and now. So try the elastic band technique. If it hasn't worked for you historically, you can try it again. And it's important that you understand the rationale for it, that it's about getting you out of your head and into the room. Again, all of these techniques aren't going to be applicable to you, but it's about cherry picking which ones work and which ones don't. So that may mean a bit of trial and error. But I can assure you, if you are able to put into practice some of the stuff I've spoken about, you will start getting a hold over your obsessive thoughts. If you've enjoyed today's tips, please do hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and I will always give you plenty more tips on how you can use psychology to improve your day-to-day functioning.